Alright, this video will explain how to do the last couple exercise sets in Aplia 3.1. So don't worry about formal fallacies 2. I'm wiping that out because it's requiring you to do more than I really want you to do, and that stuff isn't going to show so much on the test. So let's take a look at recognizing informal fallacies and formal and informal fallacies practice. So informal fallacies, unlike formal fallacies, require me to look at the content of the argument to figure out if there's been an error in moving from the premises to the conclusion that is a result of misunderstanding what that content's going to do. The formal fallacies are always going to be a structural error, cases where it doesn't matter what the content is, the structure creates this problem. And you can show that by providing counterexamples where all it takes is moving to a different example to show that that structural argument is going to break down in that case and really break down in every case. So each of the sets, this is what they tell me, each set of 3 arguments includes one argument that commits an informal fallacy. For each set, determine which one of the 3 arguments is fallacious. Alright, so they're going to give me 3, and I got to pick which one of these is the bad one. To do that, I've got to figure out which one has the error in the reasoning. So let's take a look at argument A. The burning of fossil fuels increased dramatically during the 20th century. Scientists have concluded that, during that same time period, the physical manifestation of global warming also increased disproportionately compared to typical variations throughout history. Conclusion, therefore, the burning of fossil fuels probably contributes to global warming. Alright. So here I got to figure out, does this premise here about the burning of fossil fuels increasing dramatically and the fact that it correlates with this other stuff, does that support this conclusion? And yes, it does. It doesn't make it definitely the case, but because these two things are in lockstep with each other, and and that's all I've got. I don't have any additional information that would lead me to think that this was not the case, that there is no causal effect going on. Then on the face of it, this is at least more probable. So this one's fine. Not an airtight argument, but one at least where the premises do support the conclusion. Let's look at argument B then. In 1933, the United States Congress repealed the prohibition laws that forbade the sale, manufacture, and transportation of alcohol for consumption. Around the same time, severe drought and dust storms swept across the Great Plains. Therefore, the repeal of prohibition must have caused the severe dust storms. Okay. So in this case, they've made it fairly easy for me, and that this is an argument where if I look at the conclusion, I should be thinking, whoa, this is too strong. This is going to be an inductive argument because of the evidence that I have available to me. So at best, you could say the repeal of prohibition might have caused the severe dust storms. But here they've got it like, that was definitely the cause. That's already a problem. That wouldn't necessarily follow from these, or wouldn't even likely follow from these premises. So we've got a problem with the strength of the argument, but also look what they've got here. They're trying to set up this causal relationship between these two things, but here, unlike in the first case where we've got them correlating in lockstep, and then in this case they've got some additional reasons to think that this was atypical. Here I don't really have that obvious correlation in lockstep. They're trying to build this causal connection between two things that don't look particularly correlated or causally related, right? If they pass this prohibition and we've got the severe drought going on, is one likely to cause the other just because they happen at the same time? No, we would need more than that. And especially here because they've also got this really strong conclusion, this is the argument I want to point at and be like, that's a problem. But for the sake of this, let's look at that third argument just to make sure that we didn't slip up or fall for an easy trick. During the decades preceding the droughts, extensive farming in the Great Plains killed the natural grasses that kept soil in place. Okay. The early 1930s saw a severe drought. Okay. Farming techniques must have contributed to the severe dust storms that occurred in the Great Plains throughout the 1930s. All right. So here, this argument is also not great, I want to say, because this conclusion is, again, way too strong. We don't know it must have contributed to it. We only know that it was likely to contribute to it, given the evidence we have. So that's a problem. Just like the argument above, it's got this conclusion that's too strongly worded, so it wouldn't be a strong argument, it'd be weak. But here, this is a case where at least the reasoning seems okay, other than or it's too strongly worded your conclusion. That just because I've got this extensive farming and that there's also severe drought in that same time period, and that it makes sense that it's robbing them of moisture in this other business, that doesn't mean that I've made an error in the reasoning, moving from these premises to this conclusion. I mean, the error is that I worded my conclusion too strongly. if I had said farming techniques must or probably contributed to it, that would be fine. Here, the error wasn't that well, let me rephrase that. The error is still that I've worded my conclusion way too strongly. But more than that, it doesn't look like there's any strong link between these two premises and this at all. Like, they are totally unconnected. Given my leap from correlation to causation here, that isn't really the case in this argument. So argument B is my informal fallacy in that case. And that's what you're going to do for the other argument set in this section. Look at each of the arguments, pay attention to the wording of the conclusion, that's sometimes helpful, but more importantly, look for, is there this leap in logic that occurs from the premises to the conclusion that makes it obvious that there was an error in the reasoning, which is what I got in argument B, but didn't get so much in argument C, even though both of these arguments are weak, given the strength of the wording in the conclusion and the strength of the evidence they use. Now let's look at formal and informal fallacies in practice. So here they want me to determine whether each argument is a good argument or a defective one. If it's defective, determine whether it commits a fallacy and indicate which type, formal or informal, it commits. So here's my argument. If Julius Caesar was an astronaut, then Julius Caesar was a human being. Julius Caesar was obviously a human being, therefore Julius Caesar was an astronaut. Okay, so here I should recognize, hey, this is not true, right? I mean, it's not the case that Julius Caesar was an astronaut, so that should give me some reason to suspect the argument. It's not a good one. He was alive way before being an astronaut was possible. But even more so, there's a fallacy being committed here, right? The fallacy is that if A, then B, and they know that B is true, this business about being a human being, they then say, oh, it's got to be that A is true too. That never works. This is affirming the consequent of a conditional, and that is always and everywhere a fallacy. Just because if A then B, that doesn't mean if B then A. It doesn't go back that way. So if I have a conditional, if A then B, and I know that B is true, that tells me nothing about A. There's really no more information new that I can get from that. And so argument A commits a fallacy, and what's important here is the structure of this argument, and not so much the content. And I could show that by really just switching this to a different argument. So let's say if Barack Obama was an astronaut, then Barack Obama was a human being, right? So we've changed the content. Barack Obama was a human being, therefore Barack Obama was an astronaut. Does that work? No, it doesn't. There's still, again, a problem with building this link. If A then B, B is true, therefore A is true. Just not going to work there. And let's sort of modify it even further to show that the content is really irrelevant here. So let's change it to, if I own a home, then I own land. Right? That's my first premise. If I own a home, then I own land. And then I do own land. And then I say, well, automatically then I must own a home. Is that always going to follow? No. I could own land without a home on it. Maybe I own farmland where there is no home on the structure. I just use it for growing things. Or maybe it's an empty plot. Because I'm planning on building in the future, but I don't have one yet. So the problem here is that it's a formal fallacy because the structure of the argument is bad. Looking ahead to the next one, same sort of ideas here. I have hit the jackpot every time I have played a slot machine. Granted, I've only played a slot machine one time, but I am sure that I have the magic touch and will continue to win every time I play. Right, so you should recognize, hey, there's a problem with this, right? If this was your own argument, you should realize that's not the case. Don't go gambling based on this idea, right? So bad argument. And then I got to figure out if there's an error in the reasoning here, right? So somebody has gone from every time in the past when I played a slot machine, I hit the jackpot. Right? We don't know how many times. Oh, excuse me, we do know how many times they played. They did it one time, so they played it once, hit the jackpot, and they say, well, now every time going forward, I'm going to win. Is that good reasoning? You should be thinking, ooh, that looks like there's a problem, right? If I use this in other areas, this would clearly be an issue. So imagine that you go driving on a day when it rains, and you have an accident on that day. Should you therefore think going forward, well, every time it rains, I'm going to get an accident, so I just won't drive when it rains? You should be thinking, well, no, not necessarily. Just because you did it one time and it happened that way is no guarantee that it's going to happen that way in the future. It's only evidence that it might happen, or eventually maybe probably or likely will happen, depending on how many times those things line up. So there's an error here, and now that I've told you that, you should be able to figure out whether that's an error in the structure of the argument or an error in the content. And to figure that out again, see if it matters if I change how the content of the argument. If it doesn't, then it really should be a formal fallacy. Now this one's going to be a little tricky because it's going to look like, ooh, this is always going to be a kind of problem. The other quick and dirty trick for figuring out whether something is formal or informal as a fallacy is that formal fallacies almost always and everywhere occur with deductive arguments. Right? That's going to steer you correct, as far as I know, every time. If it's a deductive argument and there's an error in the reasoning, the fallacy is going to be formal. Informal fallacies occur in inductive arguments. There's an error in the reasoning there. In an inductive argument, it's always and everywhere going to be informal. So here, because I know this is an inductive argument, I'm using the past to make a prediction about the future. If there is an error in the reasoning, I should be leaning towards informal fallacy rather than formal fallacy. Okay. And that is the Aplia 3.1 exercise set. Hopefully you find this useful.